don't and they want to continue their ways, then they're going to stay in prison for a very, very long time. The handcuffs that they come in with don't turn into halos once they come into our facility. They've got to make that opportunity. They've got to take that opportunity to better themselves. And if they want to, they can. We can get you a more exhaustive list if you like.
Are there any other questions?
You mentioned 2 murders at Lee. Can you talk more about that?
There's been 1 murder at Lee. There's been 2 murders. I think the other one was at Corinth.
Okay.
So that murder at Lee was a couple weeks ago. I think it was on election day, actually, if I recall correctly.
And can you discuss, obviously a lot of people are gang members. Has that been reduced at all? Have you been successful in getting people out of gangs, reducing that?
Well, I think one of the things is Academy of Hope. We've got some of our former gang leaders, and it's actually led by a former gang leader in Massachusetts. He came down. I heard him speak at the conference that I was attending, and he came down, and we've got these people in there, and I think they're turning their lives around. We haven't had a lot of violence in that area, and when we have had a lot of violence, or when there's been minor issues at Lee, they've actually gone to the other dorms and talked to people and said, hey, we want to help. Let's talk it out. Let's not act this way. Teaching them how to use their minds instead of their fists if there's a disagreement or they feel disrespected. Stedman Graham, Oprah Winfrey's boyfriend, is heavily involved with this. I mean, we've got people from around the country who are coming in to try to do what we can do. Again, we can only do so much, though. If these folks don't want to better themselves when they come to prison, they can just sit in their cell and not better themselves and go out and live the same life, or they can take the opportunities to get GED, they can get a welding certificate. They can go out and be a productive member of society, and that's what we want. That's what Governor Masters put money in the budget for. The General Assembly has funded it, and we think it's successful. And why does it matter? It matters for public safety. It matters for prison safety.
Director Sterling, we've been talking about cell phones for a long time now, and your need or want to get the FCC rules changed. How do you feel about that process? Are you still making inroads? And is there anything that the community can do to help? Can we write our senators or Congress people?
They can call their senators. They can call their House members. Most of our House members have signed on to the bill. Attorney General Wilson's dad has, Senator Graham. So we need a hearing. I want to have the cell phone industry in sworn testimony in Washington, D.C., in the Judiciary Committee, answer on the record why this can't be done. And it makes absolutely no sense that the federal government can do it, and they feel comfortable with that technology, but they're saying states cannot. It works. It would make it safer. We've seen victims be re-victimized. We've seen family members be victimized. We've seen military people be victimized. Again, this is the crux of why we have a lot of the violence. Violence is going to happen in prison. We have violent people come to prison. They're there for a reason, as the Attorney General said. But if we can stop these cell phone and legal signals from working, it would be tremendous. I've testified in front of our oversight about maybe some legislation that would help us, but kind of that route is very expensive. The easiest thing to do, the best thing to do, is just block these cell phones and stop them from working inside our prisons. It just leads to violence, it leads to danger, it leads to contraband, it leads to a lot of problems. And none of the things that cell phones in prisons lead to are good.
Could you say that this particular incident could have been quelled if you had that technology in place in 2018 or without cell phones?
I don't think it would have spread. I can tell you that. I know it wouldn't have spread.
I have a question on the charges. Are the 3 then charged with murder, are they all in relation to Michael Village's death or other inmates?
So the 3 that are charged with murder in this indictment, this first indictment that has come out here, are for the death of Mr. Rivera in F3. The vast majority of the charges are assault and battery by mob with death resulting. Again, that here is a minimum penalty of 30 years in prison, and which of course murder, the minimum penalty is 30 years in prison. I will point out about that particular statute is the way it's defined is that if you are part of a mob that engages in violence on a person and that person dies as a result of it, every member of that mob is equally guilty. And that's, again, most of the charging that is in this particular indictment.
You just mentioned the first indictment. Does that mean more are coming?
I will just say this is the first indictment. And going back to your question just real quick about whether or not if the cell phones have been jammed, I think it's certainly would have made a difference, and it also would have made a difference, and there wouldn't have been as much contraband in the prison, which really sparked this whole thing to begin with. As the general described, it's that contraband, that very involved contraband trade, and I'll encourage you to go back and look at our grand jury case Cash Cow and how intricate that was. That contraband trade is so lucrative. There's so much of it: drugs, consumer goods, clothing, tobacco, alcohol, and it drives the power structure within the prison. And of course, it's controlled by gangs. And you can imagine that once those gangs have that power, eventually they're going to disagree, and that is what a lot of times sparks the violence in the prison. There are now currently, I believe, 4 state grand jury cases that touch on this issue. There's obviously Cash Cow, which specifically focused on contraband conspiracies to get in contraband to the prisons. There's obviously this case. There's Prison Empire, which was in the upstate, which is a meth ring being run from within the prison, people who were put in prison because of their meth trafficking. And then there's Graceland, which is pretty much the same thing. So this is a very pervasive problem, and if we could turn them off, I think 90% of it would be gone overnight.
And I just want to remind everybody, this is the same prison where Captain Robert Johnson was the contraband captain, and a hit was ordered from this prison back, I don't know if that was 2008 or it was back in the mid to early 2000s, where a hit was ordered because he was doing such a good job, and he was shot point blank in his house because of a contraband cell phone.
And just back to your question earlier, you can never say what would have happened had there been jamming technology that prevented the contraband cell phones from being implemented. But I 100% agree with Director Sterling that the spread from one dormitory to another dormitory in the prison could have absolutely been stopped. As to the initial spark, the killing of the unaffiliated inmate, Village, I believe his name was, that contraband, who's to say that the contraband and the commerce that's being created is not creating this type of culture in the prison? Now, the culture's already there for the crime to occur, but the ability for contraband to pour into the prisons, which incentivizes gangs to have more at stake and to have more illicit commerce, more illicit transactions going on, which means there's more to lose. And when there's more for them to lose within the prison system, it's going to it's like throwing gasoline on a fire for people who already, like you said, there were 1,300 maximum security inmates in that prison at that time. These are people who, when they go to prison, they don't become angels. They're given the opportunity to become angels, to become productive members of society, but they don't just automatically start off that way. So they're in there, they already have a predisposition to engage in this type of illicit conduct, and they do so, but then now they have more to lose. And again, it's not just about the safety of the inmates who are wards of the state, it's about the safety of the correctional officers who are already handicapped. They're already handicapped in their ability to prevent this type of conduct, but it also causes a risk to them outside of the prison system, as Director Sterling just talked about from years ago. And it also affects like you go back to the Cash Cow case. I would encourage you to go to our website. I think the press release for the Cash Cow about a year ago, I believe, it was a very complex scheme going on in multiple prisons in the Department of Corrections that was being facilitated by contraband cell phones, and it's just, again, we're tying their hands when we can't jam that technology, and we're allowing the commerce to grow, we're allowing the violence to grow, we're creating a greater risk of exposure to everybody involved, not just the inmates, but the citizens around the prison. All right, are there any other questions at this time? I want to thank you. We did say this in the press release. Mr. Waters was just reminding me, as we have stated in the press release and in every press conference, every one of these individuals who has been charged with a crime is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. We wanted to state that for the record. Obviously, we have the evidence that supports the indictments, but their presumption of innocence attaches until that changes in a court of law. So, you mentioned the 5-point shooter. Yeah, y'all remember that one of the bond individuals who was being bonded yesterday out in Esco's attention was the 5-point shooter, and that was kind of interesting to me. Was there another issue, Craig?
Yeah, just very quickly, we were talking about...
Can we have you behind the mic, please?
My apologies. The general mentioned the Cash Cow case, and I just wanted to point out that one of the individuals indicted here today is Ricardo Joseph. He's currently charged with murder and other offenses. He's also been indicted in the Cash Cow case for max-level methamphetamine trafficking as well as criminal conspiracy. So there's at least one defendant who's been charged in both of these cases.
Thank you all.
Of those that are still in prison, have they all been pretty much scattered, or are some of them all, some still housed together?
No, I think most of them should be in a RHU setting, secure setting. You can look at that, that's where most of them should be.
It's on their spreadsheet.
It's on the sheet too. I think that most of them are in a restricted housing unit for basic, if not all.
Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it. Thank you to everyone up here for your efforts.